What's up, guys? We're back. I know it's been a little while. We're posting a new video today. What we're working on today is something I'm really excited about. I've been wanting to cook this for a very long time and just have not gotten around to doing it. What we're cooking today is a hog shoulder, wild hog shoulder. So this isn't, we didn't go to the grocery store and buy like a Boston butt or something. We're actually taking this hog shoulder, it's bone in. You can see we've got some silver skin. We'll clean that up in a second, but we're gonna basically smoke this thing just like we would smoke a pork butt. So I'm gonna take it, I'm gonna put some of my favorite rubs on it, use a binder like we're gonna use mustard today, use that, cook it to 160, and then we're gonna wrap it. Now, we're gonna monitor it during that cooking process, because what's different about wild hog is that these things are actually out running around. They're not trapped in some sort of a pen or anything like that. So they're out running around, they're moving around a lot more, so the meat actually it's much more red. There's a lot more blood flow in their meat, and they're not as fat. So we're gonna have to monitor it to make sure that we're not drying it out, which also means that we're gonna cook it at a very low temperature. So I'm gonna cook it at 225, which is where I normally like to cook my pork. And then we're just gonna let this thing slowly come up to temp. Now, if we start to see that it's drying out a little bit too much, we'll wrap it before it gets to 160, but the plan is to wrap it at 160. We're just kind of playing it by ear today because I've never done one of these shoulders like this. I usually grind it up and make it into sausage. So let's get started with this. The first thing you'll notice on these is there's a lot of this fat. You know, on this thin part, you've kind of got this fat that's kind of hard, and it's probably not going to render down. And you can see underneath this layer of fat here, we've actually got some silver skin. So I'm going to go ahead and try to get that removed as best I can, and then we'll come back and we'll season it. So stick around for that, and we'll jump right into this one. All right, we've got this thing trimmed up. I trimmed off as much of the silver skin as I really could without decomposing all of the different muscles. And then I also cut off a lot of the fat. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna season it up. And what I'm doing today is I'm doing a mix. And I know this is cow cover from Cosmos, but it tastes great on pork, and we're gonna need something with really bold flavors to overpower some of the gaminess that you're gonna get from one of these meats. And then I'm gonna put this honey hog barbecue from Meat Church on there to give it a little touch of sweetness. And then I'm going to throw in the Angelo's pork and poultry rub, because what that's going to do is give us a little bit more of that heat that we like. So the main rub's going to be this cow cover hot. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and get a binder put on here. So I don't need to go too heavy. We'll do one side at a time. Put that away. Go on with this. I'm going to go pretty heavy. This is a big hunk of meat, so I know a lot of people say you don't want to over-season pork, but I've found it with cuts like this, it's pretty hard too, because it's just such a big piece of meat. So I'm going on pretty heavy there. Get all the sides. Because one thing you don't want to do when you make this pulled pork is you don't want to be at the end and not have any flavor. So, whoa, that came out a little fast, no worries. All right. And I'll top it off with a little bit of this Angelo's rub, which seems to have gotten a little clumpy, but that's not a problem either. All right, flip it over. All right, put it on this side. Get that going good. Cosmo on here. Get that nice and heavy. All right, get the edges. Okay, get our other honey barbecue on there for sweetness, and then put a little bit of Angela's on top. All right. Okay, I'm going to be cooking on the Yoder today. Now, once again, we're going to be cooking it pretty low, and so that's what I really like the Yoder for. Pellet grills like that make it very easy to get down to a really low temperature without just creating a bunch of smoldering smoke. Otherwise, I would have maybe cooked it on a pit barrel or something like that, but I think the Yoder is going to be the perfect grill for this today. So I'm going to go ahead, put it on 225. I'm going to cook it on pecan today. And then once that's good to go, I'm going to let this sit for maybe 30, 45 minutes, let it kind of soak up some of that rub, get to that point where the rub's just kind of melted into the meat. And then we're going to throw it on there and we'll just set it and kind of forget it on there. So stick with us. It's a nasty day outside, so we might have a little bit of trouble with some of the wind and the sound, but we'll try to get through it the best we can. All right, guys, it's super windy out here. Super cold too. We're in the 30s, at least for us in Texas. That's cold. But what we're gonna do now is just throw it on. We've got the grill heated up. I'm gonna cook on the top rack today. That gets you a little bit more heat, but it also takes you up a little bit away from the heat source, so you may not get as much of that drying out effect. So we'll go ahead and put it on, and then we're just gonna monitor it here. I've also got some baby back ribs that I'm gonna put on there as well, not from a hog, but I'm gonna put those on as well, and then we'll just keep you guys posted. So let's get this lovely looking thing right here on the grill. With the fireboard, we're going to keep watching it and just monitor it. We'll check back with you when we're ready to go ahead and wrap it. Okay, guys, the pork shoulder has been on for about 3.5 hours now. I'm not quite at my target temp that I was at. I'm at about 140. I apologize if the wind is causing some sound issues, but I'm at about 140. But what I'm looking at is dry out on the ends of this thing, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap now. But I'll give you guys a quick glimpse so you can kind of just see where we're sitting at that mark, and then we'll go inside and wrap it. So let's take a look. Yeah, that end piece is getting crispy, but overall, this thing looks good. I mean, the bark is nice and set up. It's got it's nice hard bark on there, and everything still feels pretty good. And then if you want to take a look, here's a rack of baby backs that I'm doing. Put cow cover, just regular cow cover on those from Cosmo. So I'm gonna get this thing off, and then we'll go inside and we'll wrap it, and then we're gonna wrap it in something good, I promise. All right, guys, we've got our wild hog shoulder here, and we're ready to wrap it. So we're just gonna wrap it. I'm gonna do it in 2 layers of foil. You can see I've got my 2 layers here, and I've got another 2 layers that I'm actually gonna use for my ribs that I've got over there. What I like to do, set this aside for a second, is I'm gonna do it just like I do my ribs, just because on the one hand, this is gonna be a little more gamey than what most folks are used to. So I'm gonna put down a layer of honey, but I'm not gonna do too much to it because I still do wanna taste the actual meat itself. But I'm gonna put down a layer of honey, and then I'm just gonna sprinkle a little bit of brown sugar on. I don't wanna make this too sweet. I don't like it crazy sweet, but just enough brown sugar there. And then I'm gonna lay out just a few little pieces of butter here. I'm gonna add some more of our rub. I'm just gonna use the Cosmos as my base here, and I'll add a little bit of that honey hog barbecue. You don't need a whole lot more of that because I've already added more sugar. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna kind of fold these up a bit. I'm gonna add some liquid. And what I'm going to do here is I don't recommend using like a really nice bourbon. This is a pretty cheap bourbon, not my favorite bourbon at all by any stretch. But it's something that I can get on a regular basis, which for those of you who drink bourbon on a regular basis, you know, if there's a good bourbon out there, it's hard to find. So this one's easy to find, at least for the foreseeable future. Doesn't seem like it's going to be difficult to source. So I'm actually going to set that down with the main meat side facing down like that. Then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to come back in on this side, put a little more honey. I'm just going to put one slab of butter on there, and I'm going to put a little bit more of the seasoning as well. Let's add that in. Just make sure we've got some extra flavor on there. And I'll come back in with a little bit of brown sugar on top. Not too much. Being careful to just kind of sprinkle it on there. This will all melt in and become one with the meat. So, okay, so that's good. We'll wrap the first layer on here first. Then I'm going to kind of rotate this. Pull one side up over here like this. And kind of get this secured. Wrapping it around. Kind of get some extra layers there because this does have bones in it, so I make sure that I'm being cognizant of that, potentially poking holes. And you want to wrap this pretty tight. It doesn't matter if you steam it a little bit in this packaging. That's fine. It's going to make it more tender anyway. So let's go ahead, put this back out on the pit, and then we'll come back when we're at about 190. Okay, guys, we are now sitting right at about 200 degrees. I know I said originally 190. Wasn't quite there, so what I'm doing is about 200. We should be good to go. It feels done. It feels done. Let's take a look. I mean, it's wrapped. Don't mind the ribs, but it's wrapped up. And then we're gonna get this sandwich. All right, guys, we've had that resting in the oven for about 30 minutes now. So we're going to go ahead and just pull it. Now, it's probably not going to pull apart as well as a normal pulled pork, but it should come apart relatively easily. This is, there's not as much fat in this meat, but we can see it's breaking apart just fine. It's a little stringy, definitely not as tender as when you get in a store, but that's because there's not as much connective fatty tissue. But it's falling apart just fine. Should have a clean bone here, be my guess. Just pull it off bit by bit. Pretty clean. Here's your normal bone that you'd have in a pulled pork or a pork butt. Got a little bit of that joint bone on there. But yeah, this is coming apart quite well. Oh, that's hot. I don't know if this is going to be any good. Well, that's hot. Breathe. Fast forward. I mean, I'll do the normal kind of like fast forwarding through some of this, but oh, that's hot. broken there. Some cartilage and junk that probably don't went in there. Has an interesting smell to it. Do I really?
Yeah, you're right.
I mean, but I'll tell you, I cannot breathe. It's.
Well, we'd go get you nose spray, but I'm otherwise occupied.
You gotta do both. All right, we've got this thing pulled apart now. I think it's a good idea to go ahead and give it a little bit of a try. So let's try it before. We're going to add some sauce to it, but let's try it first. Now you'll notice this didn't pull apart like a normal pulled pork. It doesn't have near the fat content, so it's definitely a little drier. So we're going to have to probably add back in some of that juice, and then we'll mix in some of that barbecue sauce, in order to make it just a little bit more moist. But let's give it a try and just see what it tastes like. And one thing you'll notice too is this meat's very dark. And that's because this animal didn't live in a cage its whole life. It was actually out roaming around, foraging, trying to get food for itself. And what that does is just, it makes that meat a lot darker because of all the blood flow that's going to it, versus its meals being provided for it all the time. So let's get a piece and give this a try. Oh man, that's really good. That's really, really good actually. You can tell that it doesn't taste like pork. It almost has more of a dark meat turkey kind of taste to it. But you pick up those tones from the bourbon, from the rub that we used. Just definitely not over seasoned at all. But you get a really good flavor with it. I actually really, really like that. So I mean, it makes sense, right? That it almost tastes like a turkey leg or a turkey thigh. That's really awesome. I think this is going to be really good. We're going to make sandwiches out of this. Throw in some barbecue sauce, and we'll be good to go. Here it's New Year's Eve. We're going to a party, and I can't think of a better thing to bring to a party than something like this that people haven't tried before, and something that it actually tastes good as well. So, if you like this video, give it a like, give it that thumbs up, hit subscribe. We're gonna keep making more videos like this as time goes on. So until next time, stay safe out there and happy cooking.